Your neighbor knows a version of your dog that you don't. They know exactly what time the barking starts, they know how long it lasts, and they know which days are worse than others. They have heard things through the wall that you will never hear, simply because you are never there when they happen. For most of us, the moment we walk back through the door, we find a dog that looks completely normal, calm, perhaps a little excited, acting as if nothing happened. From their perspective, in that moment of reunion, nothing did. But the evidence of the hours prior is often hidden in plain sight. A sofa cushion moved to the floor, the corner of a rug that wasn't frayed this morning, or a very specific, heavy silence that feels different from actual peace. When you see these signs, you might assume it is boredom, mischief, or just a bad day. But for decades, behavioral researchers have been doing what most owners cannot. They leave a camera running, walk out, and watch. What those cameras capture, hour by hour, heartbeat by heartbeat, is one of the most revealing findings in animal psychology. Your dog isn't just missing you when you're gone. A specific biological process is unfolding in their brain, and it begins much sooner than you think. In 2010, researchers at the University of Milan installed cameras in the homes of 23 dogs to witness the exact timeline of an absence. The data they gathered was startlingly precise. On average, the first vocalizations, the whining, the barking, or the long, low howls, began just 3 minutes and 15 seconds after the owner closed the door. Within 7 minutes, destructive behavior followed. If your furniture was going to be chewed or your mail shredded, it usually happened before you even finished your morning commute. But the most revealing discovery wasn't the noise, it was what happened when the noise stopped. To a neighbor or a passerby, a quiet house suggests a dog that has finally settled down. The camera, however, tells a different story. As the vocalizations subside, the dog's physiological markers, heart rate and panting, often remain dangerously high. They haven't found calm, they have simply shifted from an outward expression of distress to an internal one. The silence isn't a sign of recovery, it's a sign that the panic has moved deeper into their system, where it continues to cycle, hour after hour. This distress does not follow a clean, steady decline into sleep. Instead, the footage reveals a rhythmic desperation. Researchers found that every 23 to 28 minutes, there's a new spike, a renewed burst of pacing, scratching, or howling, followed by a quieter period, then another spike. They aren't settling, they are cycling. The silence between those spikes is not a recovery of peace, but a period of neural exhaustion before the next wave hits. In contrast, dogs without separation issues spend approximately 97% of their time in passive behavior, resting, lying down, or occasionally checking the water bowl. The difference between these two groups isn't about breed or age, it is about the internal prediction system of the dog. Perhaps the most haunting discovery in this field is the concept of learned helplessness. When a dog finally goes quiet after an hour of frantic activity, we want to believe they have accepted the situation. However, psychology suggests a darker reality. Just as in Martin Seligman's foundational experiments, an animal under prolonged, inescapable stress may simply stop acting because it has learned that its actions, its cries, and its efforts change nothing. They aren't being good, they have simply shut down. In these cases, passivity is not a sign of a trained mind, but the brain's default emergency brake when it is under a level of stress it can no longer process. The panic doesn't actually begin when the door clicks shut. For many dogs, the internal alarm sounds while you are still in the house, perhaps while you are still finishing your coffee. Through a process called back-chaining, dogs learn to read your departure routine in reverse. Every morning follows a script. You check your phone, you put on your shoes, you glance at the clock, and you reach for your keys. Individually, these are mundane actions. To your dog, they are a sequence of high-stakes signals. Researchers as far back as the 1980s documented that dogs with separation anxiety show measurable stress responses, pacing, panting, and dilated pupils long before the bag even comes out. They aren't responding to your absence yet.
they are responding to the prediction of it. There is a common piece of advice that suggests you should desensitize your dog by picking up your keys randomly or putting on your shoes just to sit on the couch. However, a 2014 study from the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona found that making departures unpredictable doesn't always help. For some dogs, it actually increases fear. The problem isn't the keys or the shoes. The problem is the looming uncertainty of what happens after you go. Your dog isn't afraid of your footwear. They are afraid of the void that follows it. And they are hoping that this time, if they follow you from room to room closely enough, the sequence might finally break. One of the most counterintuitive findings comes from a longitudinal study by the Royal Veterinary College called Generation Pup. They tracked 145 dogs from the moment of adoption to see what actually predicted long-term separation problems. What they found surprised even veteran trainers. A long, emotional goodbye didn't make much of a difference. What mattered most was the return. If an owner comes home to find a chewed-up chair or a mess on the rug and responds with visible upset, raised voices, frustration, or prolonged scolding, that dog is 6 times more likely to develop chronic separation issues. From our human perspective, we think we are teaching them a lesson. But a dog's brain doesn't have a chain of causation that spans 4 hours. They cannot connect your current anger to the cushion they destroyed at 10 a.m. To the dog, your frustration is linked directly to your arrival. Instead of your return being the highlight of their day, it becomes a moment they have to brace for. This creates a devastating loop. A dog that is anxious about you coming home is a dog that becomes even more anxious about you leaving. The two ends of your absence are bound by a bridge of stress, making the entire day a cycle of anticipatory fear. Beyond the behavior, there is a biological echo that connects you to your dog even when you are miles apart. In 2019, a team at Linköping University in Sweden measured long-term cortisol levels in 58 dog owner pairs. They weren't looking at the temporary spike of a bad morning, but at the slow accumulation of stress hormones over months, captured in hair and fur samples. The results showed that the stress levels of the dog and the owner were almost perfectly synchronized. But the most striking part of the discovery was the direction of that relationship. The owner's cortisol levels predicted the dog's, not the other way around. What this means is that your dog's nervous system is constantly calibrating itself against yours. They don't start their day of solitude from a neutral baseline. They started from whatever emotional state you've been carrying. The 8 hours you were gone aren't happening in isolation. They are happening on top of the 16 hours you spend together. If you were chronically stressed, rushed, or anxious, your dog is essentially inhaling that tension, making them far more likely to snap when the door finally closes. You aren't just leaving a dog at home, you are leaving a biological reflection of your own internal world. The market for separation anxiety is flooded with quick fixes, pheromone diffusers, calming supplements, and high-tech puzzle toys. Yet for many owners, the results are modest at best. This is because these products attempt to manage the 8 hours you were gone, whereas the real point of intervention is the other 16 hours you were home. The only method with consistent scientific evidence is graduated exposure. It isn't about leaving for 5 minutes and hoping for the best. It is about rebuilding the dog's internal prediction system from the ground up. It starts with seconds, walking to the door, touching the handle, and coming back in before the dog's nervous system even has a chance to spike. It feels absurdly slow, almost like you're doing nothing at all. But you aren't teaching obedience. You are providing enough repetitions of the same sequence. You leave, you return, that the brain's alarm system finally begins to update its software. Practitioners of this method consistently report a specific tipping point. Once a dog can tolerate roughly 40 minutes of absence without distress, the progress to 4 or even 8 hours tends to follow with surprising speed. The 40-minute mark isn't magic. It is simply the threshold where the dog has accumulated enough evidence to believe, truly and biologically, in your return.
What the cameras have been showing us for 30 years is that the dogs who struggle the most aren't badly trained or spiteful. They are simply responding to the absence of the one nervous system their own has been calibrated against, yours. The goal isn't just to have a dog that stays quiet while you're at work. The goal is to reach a place where the dog understands in their bones, rather than just their brain, that the door opening and the door closing are ultimately the same event, just in a different order.